Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to Hilaal. I will say Jazakallah to Luqman for holding the fort for us for that first half an hour. Now, over this weekend, we saw the tragic passing of one of South Africa's most revered football coaches, that is none other than Clive Barker. Clive Barker led Bafana Bafana to glory in the 1996 Africa Cup of Nations, and also led the national team to its first ever World Cup finals appearance in France in 1998. Joining me now to pay tribute to that iconic coach, I'd like to welcome the man that scored the 2 goals against Tunisia in that very final of AFCON in 1996 at the FNB Stadium, Mr. Mark Williams. Mr. Williams, good evening, and thank you so much for joining us on Hilaal.
Now, thank you for having me for the first time actually on the show. I heard a lot about the show. So yeah, it is one of those things that there's always a first time. But then, like you said, there's a bit of sadness that went tragic in South Africa. One of the icons of South African coaches, a friend of mine, a pal, a coach, a mentor. You know, such a lot of things that I can mention. But, you know, for his family that's going through it, I think he's at a better place actually because a couple of months, you know, what he was going through wasn't nice. But like we said, may his soul rest in peace to Coach Clive Barker.
Mark, you were there in 96. So we're coming out of decades and decades of apartheid. And here we have this coach that wants one thing, to unite the nations. Now, I'm not going to talk about your 2 goals because everybody remembers Mark Williams' brace against Tunisia. But just building up to the tournament, a year after the Springboks had won the Rugby World Cup, how was he able to galvanize so many of the big names like yourself, Mark Fish, Dr. Kumalo, Eric Tinkler, Andre Arends, Sean Bartlett, the list goes on, into a winning team with such a great mentality?
I think what you just touched on actually, which is very interesting. When I was, because the first coach that gave me opportunity was actually Clive Barker. I started with the team since 1992, but never got the opportunity. Always sit on the bench, bit of patience, bit of politics, bit of racism. And, you know, I'm one of those guys, I say it the way it is, you know. My job, I found out that I had a God-given talent. My job was scoring goals, but never got the opportunity until Clive Barker came and took that team 95. And he gave me a call and he said, look, the team is there. If you want to be part of it, you give me everything I ask for and you can be part of it. And like you mentioned, some of those big names. Just before that, just remember, they used to call us 4x4s because we used to be beaten by Zambia 4-0, Nigeria 4-0, and the South African people with the sense of humor called us 4x4s. But when it came to 96, after that 95, when we won that World Cup, we then decided as players that, you know what, we can do it for the nations, for the nation, and what a lovely place to be. It's in our backyard, and we had the 12 men, which were the supporters, but also a coach that had beliefs in each and every player, not just the 11 that played, also the guys that's on the bench. And you could go to him. You know, it's not like these coaches nowadays, you can't even go out. You know, it's almost like they lock you in. Clive gave us that freedom. Coach Clive gave us that freedom. I'm not the only one that talks about it, but a freedom to, before the game, to express yourself. And on the day when we played, we can express ourselves on the soccer field.
Mr. Williams, let's speak about that final. You're coming off the bench to replace Phil Masinga, the late Phil Masinga. What does the late Coach Clive Barker tell you? Does he give you any instructions for you to go ahead and create that piece of history for South Africa? Or did he just say, Mark, be yourself and go do what you do best, and that's score goals?
It's almost like you read my mind, but, you know, he was one of those guys. It started actually, 3 days before the final. And I remember the night before the final, there's 2 coaches that I had the great respect. The one was coaching me at the Lenny called Budgie Byrne. And he asked Budgie Byrne the Friday night, the day before the final, do you think Mark is ready tomorrow? And Budgie Byrne said to him, if there's one person that's ready, it is Mark Williams. And that made me feel so special. But on the day, I was looking at the score, and it was 0-0. There was 20 minutes left. And I looked at the coach, and he looked at me, and he tried to make up his mind. He wasn't sure what's happening. And the next thing, before he shouted Mark, I was already in front of him. And all he said to me, he said, well, go out there, you know what to do. And what a lovely, he didn't talk much. He knew that I was ready. And, 2 minutes onto the field, when I scored the first goal, and 2 minutes later, when I scored the second goal, then I realized it wasn't a dream. But that is what dreams are made. A kid that came from the back streets, from the gangsterism, had a dream, had a vision, and worked hard towards it, and had a wonderful coach that understand the philosophy of the mind and gave me that opportunity. And I took it in both hands. And that's what we want to see. We want to see more Mark Williamses coming out of these areas. But Clive Barker just had that spark to make players believe in him and give them everything on the field of the day of play.
Mr. Williams, what is the one unique quality that you could look at the late coach Clive Barker, and say this is something that stood out as not just a person but also a football mentor?
The one thing is that, and you know what, I've got such a lot, because we used to sit and have a couple of drinks before the game, after the game, and just talk generally, as a father figure. And you don't get those type of coaches anymore. If you can try and get an interview now, I mean, Bafana already qualified for the AFCON Cup. If you can get an interview with one of the players just to talk anything, it's so difficult. But Clive he made us be free before the game. He said, bring your families, come. The game is only tomorrow. Let them come and sit. Let them talk. And that is one quality that I played in so many countries overseas. And I must say, Clive Barker had that special thing, how to make players feel before the game. He gave them that freedom. So when it comes on the day of the game, you can express yourself, because you don't have tense, you don't feeling nervous. He made you believe that whatever you got, you can go out there and do it in your ability. And that is one thing that Clive had that not a lot of coaches have. And I have to give him credit for that. May his soul rest in peace.
Definitely. Mr. Williams, on that day in February 1996, when the entire nation is in a state of happiness, glory, when Neil Tovey lifts that trophy, how did it feel at that time to be an African champion under a coach that was revered and against teams that were playing football way before South Africa were readmitted, and especially when you had the likes of Nigeria and Ghana were powerhouses at that time? For you guys to be the champions of Africa in your backyard at the FNB Stadium, that moment, how did it feel just to be a champion and to conquer the continent of Africa?
I think that you didn't want it to finish. I mean, the celebration was when Neil, our captain, lifted up the trophy, actually. You're like, no, man, come on, guys, we need to wake up, come on, we're dreaming. Because, we played against Cameroon. Cameroon 4 years ago played in the World Cup, 3 years ago played in the World Cup. And when we beat them, we thought that, if we can just make it to the semifinals. But here, Neil lifted up that trophy, the African Cup of Nations. For some of the players, they didn't know what it is. It opened a lot of doors internationally for South African players. And, 27 years later, they haven't won it. So all I'm saying is that with all the knowledge that I've got, a lot of players got, they must use it. Let us go back into our roots. Go and look for the Mark Williams, look for the Benny McCarthy's, look for the Sean Bartlett's, and bring them with the right mentality. Because the mentality is very important. It's no good you bring foreign coaches. But when the foreign coaches come here, they don't know what it is to be in Soweto. They don't know what it is to be in the Cape Flats. They don't know what it is for some of the players that don't have food in the house. And that is what Clive Barker had. He had that special breed of knowing the mentality of South African players. And that's why it was a great moment. It will live for me forever. I don't think all the players that played, and a lot of South Africans, will never forget that day. That must have been probably one of the biggest days in sport South Africa had. And yes, we can talk about the World Cup, but it's not like soccer. Soccer, people love it. They love it. They eat it. I've never seen black and white people jumping on each other, smoking, drinking, and just for whole 2 weeks before I went to England. So that was a great moment in my life. And I can only say thanks to God for giving me that opportunity.
Mr. Williams, I've got two more questions for you. In the 1998 World Cup, I know 6 months before that World Cup started, of course, Clive Barker was relieved of his duties coming from the Intercontinental Cup that happened in Saudi Arabia. Do you think things would have been different if it was Coach Clive leading you guys in France in 1998?
That's quite interesting, I want to say. And you know what? It's not about arrogance and things like that. But I think the top soccer players, they got a bit of arrogance inside of them. I think that the whole world would have known who was Mark Williams. I think I made a statement on the international after the '96, but I think that 86 would have been putting me on the world map because I think that I could have been putting myself as in one of the best strikers at that moment in the world, if not in the top five. I was as quick can be. I was as fast can be. I had all the experience. All I needed was just the opportunity to play in the World Cup. But like we all know, as South African, as soon as there is sort of celebrations and, um, and people getting accolades, there's a lot of jealousy coming in from your own country. And it is sad that Clive Barker couldn't take that Bafana team to the World Cup. But I think we would have been the first team that would have made it to the finals. And why did I say that? Because we played the likes of Brazil, we drew against them. Well, they beat us. We played against Argentina, we drew against them. We played against Germany, and this were the world champion teams I'm talking about, and they couldn't beat us. So if we had the opportunity to get them in the World Cup, I think we would have been probably the first team forever to winning it. But we can say that. But just from a confidence point, I think we would have been the first team in the finals. That's how good that '96 team was.
One final question, Mr. Williams. As we look at it today, Bafana Bafana, it's not the same Bafana Bafana as the one you played in, as the ones we revered in the 90s. Where can we find, you mentioned it earlier, the next Clive Barker, the next local coach? Because that's what we want. We want a local coach, someone from our Kassis, someone from the South African soil that can lead this team into a World Cup finals. Uh, is there someone with the spirit of Clive Barker right here in South Africa that can do that?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think, I can mention because, like we said, we are a rainbow nation. People must understand. Soccer is not a black sport. It's a rainbow nation. It's for, it's Madiba said, sports can bring the nation together. And I believe that you got Coach Kevin Hunt, you got Coach Benny McCarthy, you got Coach Sean Bartlett. They got the mentality to steer it. If they get the right the support structure, I think we can see that because you need people that want it, that been there to take it to the next level. And these guys have traveled and they know the experience. So I just think that are they going to get the opportunity? With politics, sometimes you have to ask yourself and say yes or no. But I think definitely for me, I think Benny would have been the right one because players need to understand when you represent your country, you're playing for the badge,
Yes.
for the badge, not for the money. We never played for the money. That was a bonus. So people need to understand when they come for the national team, and you got Benny McCarthy, and you got assistant coaches like myself or Son Badu or people.
Okay, we seem to have lost your audio there, Mr. Williams, but thank you so much for joining us here, Mr. Williams, and we hope to see you uh, being there in the forefront of South African football, legends like yourself contributing towards football here in South Africa. We say thank you so much, Mr. Williams.
Thank you for having me on the show, and I really appreciate that. And just to the Barker family, may your soul rest in peace. I am going down Thursday to the funeral. It's going to be sad, but yeah, it's going to be at a good place. And at least I can say goodbye to my coach, Clive Barker, the dog.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Mr. Mark Williams. And you would know that that was a fantastic era of South African football, led by the late and legendary coach Clive Barker, and of course having legends like Mark Williams, Sean Bartlett, Mark Fish, Linda Buthelezi, John Shoes Mushweyo, Lucas Radebe, Sizwe Mutahung, John Moeti. The list goes on. That was a great time. Hopefully, we can have that time again in South African football. Up next, it's Maghrib Salah in Makkatul Mukarramah. I will see you after that.